In this video, I'm going to clean up this US automatic pencil sharpener. This is actually a pretty solid example. I think all the parts are there. And it's mainly just kind of dirty, and some of the pretty stuff that should be shiny isn't. So we're going to take it apart, and I'm going to clean all the individual little pieces parts, and then we're going to mount it on a nice oak plinth. The US automatic pencil sharpener patent dates shown on here are between 1906 and 1907, and I think there were patents that came out later for this basic model, but 1906 is the early patent. And so looking at that, it was October of 1906. This looks very much like the sharpener that we have here in our hand. The bottom of it, the cutters, the shavings receptacle, all looks exactly like what's depicted here. So let's get started taking this apart. This little fence right here just comes off. And I read that these were not supplied with all of this style sharpener over its history. But some people say that nope, they always had it. So I don't know if this was an option or was originally provided, but it's amazing that it's still with the sharpener after 100 years. You can see that it works just fine. The little indexing mechanism is driven forward by the tips of the cutters. Very clever. We'll pull the drawer out and set that aside. It's got a very interesting little note on it here that kind of brings to light some of the legal issues that the various manufacturers had with these machines. So to remove the blade, you just have to loosen this knurl nut, but it's pretty tight. And so I'm going to grab it with some pliers here. And it's on the same shaft as the crank. And I'm putting the tape on here so that my pliers don't scar the knurl nut on there. So I'll just hold that tight and the handle loosens. And it's a spring-loaded thing, and it should come right off. And there it is. We'll pull the spring out, and some stuff is coming with it. So there we have the crankshaft and the cutter. So to get that knurl knob loose here, I'll just grab it, and I'll use the blade basically as a lever, and it'll unscrew itself. And there's the knurl nut, and there is the cutter. Well, I'd like to take the knob off the crank. It's got a screw here. However, it's been peened on the backside, so I'm not going to attempt to get that off of there. So the indexing device is pretty easy to take off. It's just one screw. And we'll pop that screw loose right there. And we're going to make sure that that thing does not go jumping off across the workshop. And here's a retainer clip. We'll set to the side, and then here comes the mechanism. The last thing we're going to do is take the screws loose on this cast piece and separate it from the shavings receptacle or the mounting house. Small screws again, we've got to be careful. Those do not go leaping off across the shop. And there we go. So the pressed steel parts of this, I'm just going to wipe these down with a soapy towel. I do not want to hurt the decal on this, so I'm not going to put any harsh chemicals on it. And same thing here, there's this label on the drawer. We'll polish up the knob here and just clean this thing gently. So for all these parts, they all have a little bit of grease on them, and I'm just putting them in this little bath of mineral spirits just to get the whatever grease there might be off of it. And we can give it a preliminary cleaning there. So I'll put these down inside there and squish the mineral spirits around a little bit. And in the meantime, I can kind of get some of the grease here off of this cast part. And it's looking a lot better. I'm using what's called an acid brush. You can get these anywhere, any hardware store. They only cost 10 or 15 cents each, and they have kind of a stiff bristle, and they're perfect for doing this kind of work. And I just use it to get the big particles off of the parts and to cut the grease glops that might be on. So this is just the first phase of cleaning. We've got a lot more to do after this. And I'll put a little container under there because, boy, I sure don't want to lose these little leaf springs. Have to tease these out. I want to be very careful not to booger the metal on the screw, so I want to make sure the slot is clear of the gook before I try to loosen it. Whoops. So this little piece is crimped onto the barrel of this thing here, so I'm not going to try to remove it. I'll do my best to clean under there, but I will not try to remove that piece. I'm so worried about losing these tiny little screws that I'm going to put them in a separate container, and I'll address these later, along with the leaf springs. Very delicate, very small. So there's all the parts degreased, and I'll be going after most of these with this little Scotch-Brite wheel. This is a Dremel rotary tool. It's my favorite tool for cleaning up stuff like this. These little Scotch-Brite wheels come in various grits. I found the green is a nice grit to use. It's not too aggressive. I think the black is much more aggressive, so you got to be a little careful with that one. But the green will generally take care of most of the nickel-plated stuff. I just take it real easy on it and just mainly just remove the grit without trying to dig into the plating itself. So we'll start off with the cutter. That looks pretty good. It's clean, but not too clean. So I'm just polishing it up. Not too much, but just enough to get that. There's the crankshaft. It's got off of the metal that we're doing. Okay, so here we have the, so I don't want to go too crazy, but it's not looking better. But it's a hardened shutter. Hard to believe this is a nickel-plated part. Just giving it a quick going over. The last part I'm going to do is this spring. Also nickel-plated. Boy, is that looking better. Okay, we're going to go to the buffing wheel. Okay, so we'll get the rouge wax off of it and see what we have. You know, I think that looks plenty good. I can do a little more work on it off camera, but I think that looks very, very good overall. One detail is the screw head, which is pretty gross. So I have a little Dremel, just a little wire. So yeah, that looks much better. It's not polished, but it's pretty good. The little screws, I've got some locking pliers, and I'll put those in the locking pliers and go over the heads because those are always rusty. I've lost a few of them in my shop. Okay, so that looks much better. Okay, we're going to touch up the blades a little bit. I'm going to do the back side of them. And these are, this thing is almost flat, but not quite. So I just kind of work each one just back and forth a few times. You don't have to go crazy on it. And that's going to be enough to just put some oomph on the cut of this. Don't know if I've improved it a lot, but I think I improved it. We'll know soon enough when we get it put back together. This may seem like a fussy detail, but these little parts here are just plain steel as best I can tell. So I'm going to hit them with a little bit of lacquer just to clear coat them. And that should prevent rust for some time. It says this is an oil hole, but I am not going to put oil in there. I'm just going to put a little dab of this all-purpose grease in these locations just to give it a little bit of slip. This is going to be a shelf piece. I'm not going to be using it on a daily basis, so I don't really want oil to drip through and goop it up. That's going to be nice. It feels good. We're getting there. There's a little bit of dryness here in the paint, so what I'm doing is I'm just putting in a little bit of paste wax in there, and then we'll rub it out. And that should make it shine pretty nice for a long time. I mean, what would you do on an old car? You get out the turtle wax. Just rub it out with a paper towel. Let's do a sea trial.